Main Event Maniacs, presented by the Juice Box.
The main event can make or break a show. It doesn't matter how good the undercard is. If the main event is a stinker, the entire event can be tainted.
Here on Main Event Maniacs, we will revisit some of the most memorable main events in sports entertainment history, both good and bad, across various promotions and eras of professional wrestling. I'm Jay, and happy to be joined by the sharpshooter to my Scorpion Deathlock, good friend and co-host Brian.
Thanks, Jay. I'm excited for tonight's show. We are discussing the Sting, Hulk Hogan, or Hollywood Hogan, debacle, and how WCW took their hottest storyline, probably ever, and really flushed it down the toilet.
It was the hottest one of the Monday Night Wars, and they completely 1000% blew it twice. That's the amazing part. Is they
three
got a
times,
chance
really.
They got a chance to fix it and made it worse.
Yeah, it was. This was the heyday of my rebirth into wrestling. Right?
Yeah,
I had watched when I was a kid, all the way up to about '93 is when I kind of went away. And then as I was getting into my college years, something about Roddy Piper and Hulk Hogan brought me back in. And then this storyline was really sucked me in full time. And then I became a wrestling nut again, and I haven't gone back since. But yeah, this was the story that captivated me and made me a wrestling fan once again.
I mean, how could it not, though? I mean, the way they built it up, it's one of the greatest build-ups ever. And we'll get to the payoff and how it didn't necessarily land for either of us. But as far as the way to build a story and tell a story, man, it's textbook. It's as good as it could ever be in the modern era. We're talking about too, when wrestling was changing so much, man, the internet age was upon us. Dirt sheets were a big thing. You now had wrestling was so cool that it was a cultural thing everybody was into, and so you had everybody interested and involved in this. You had major television companies bidding each other for this. It was almost no holds barred come to life. You remember that plot line?
Yeah.
You had all of that, and you had the hottest mega heel who had been the hottest face of all time, just needle in the world, and you had the biggest face that WCW had, and they changed his entire character to come to this moment, and then splat. As we'll talk about.
WCW, like, this story is what really turned them into the machine that they were for that 83 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
Now, they'll say NWO, but the NWO was going on in coordinates with this storyline, right? This really begins when the NWO begins and then carries on. And after this, as we'll talk about, the NWO really cracks up and just becomes a shit show.
Well, it becomes too big to sustain anymore. Well,
they run the whole, the Wolf Pack comes out of this and all that stuff, and it never is the same again after this point.
Well, it's like anything. It's like your favorite television show, right? You have your protagonist and you have the chief antagonist, and they're just kind of dancing around each other, and you're waiting for the big payoff. And in the meanwhile, you're building up all these side characters, and then all of a sudden, the souffle is too big to hold, so it has to fraction out. And it would be like if you build up a 3-season arc for some cops and robbers kind of situation where they finally get to the person, and then it ends with they just arrest them and they go to jail. It was just it was nothing, and then you have all these other people that have been involved in this, and now what do we do with them? And one of those people being the Disco Inferno always makes it interesting. So it's there's lots
never ever was in the NWO, by the way.
Yeah, and not for a lack of trying. So,
yeah, exactly.
As we talked about. But no, there's a lot to get into this, and this is a little different from Main Event Maniacs because we're really going to talk about one match, but there's 4 matches we're really going to go through with this and a bunch of other stuff. So, Brian, this is maybe the biggest build-up we've ever had, but please give it to us here as we talk about the Sting and Hulk Hogan dalliance of WCW late 90s.
After years of being the ultimate face, Hulk Hogan has finally turned heel at Bash the Beach 1996. In a match pitting the Outsiders, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, against Sting, Macho Man Randy Savage, and Lex Luger, Hogan revealed himself to be the third man in what would become the New World Order. Hogan would regain the WCW World title in August of 1996, defeating the Giant at Hog Wild. He would then spray paint the letters NWO on the belt and begin a long reign of terror as WCW World Champion, which was only interrupted one time by Lex Luger.
I got a question for you about that too, because I've always wondered this. Did they actually let him spray paint the actual gold belt to do that?
I believe it was, 'cause I don't think it came off again. And they cleaned it up when Lex Luger won, right?
Right.
And then they put it back on after Hogan won it back. And then they cleaned it up after Sting won, right?
Yeah.
So, but I don't think it ever changed. I got to say, I'm pretty sure they put some sort of spray paint on there. I'm sure it wasn't a permanent, or, well, I mean, paint thinner will take it off, I suppose. But
Yeah. I just wonder if it would damage the way that belt. I don't know enough about the metallurgy to know if it would damage it. But in my head, I was like, they just have another belt that's like the non-painted one that they bring out for the champion.
The telltale sign would be if the top is bent.
Oh, okay.
Because that top is bent on the real WCW championship, and it's not on the fake ones that they would use, like for the Bash at the Beach in 90 or in 2000.
Yeah,
they would bring out the fake belt for Hogan to take, and then Jarrett would come out with the real belt again with the bend. So that would be the tell. I guess I didn't look close enough to see, but I'm pretty sure he spray painted on there. They cleaned it up and he spray painted it again. But you never know. They could totally have a secondary belt to use for that, so that if they did decide to change it, could take it off quick enough.
I'll put that out there to people listening to this show. If you know, hit up Juice or us on Twitter, X, or whatever. Let us know. Leave a comment, because that would be interesting to know. So.
I bet we could ask Conrad Thompson and he would know.
Can you get Conrad to call you back? Because that's another thing.
You can get Conrad to tweet you back if you have a question interesting enough. He loves belts, so that might be interesting enough.
We might have to tweet up old Conrad and see if he knows. So, yeah. He probably owns the belt. I mean, truthfully, at this point.
I believe he may, yes.
Yeah.
All right. Sting and his tag team partner Lex Luger enlist the Four Horsemen to help them take out the NWO in that year's War Games at Fall Brawl. But the NWO throws a wrench in the plans as they announce that Sting is going to be their fourth member. Quote-unquote Sting was then seen attacking Lex Luger in the parking lot, and his teammates lay in shock as the actual Sting came out to tell them it wasn't him who attacked Luger, and he wasn't even at Nitro when it happened. Luger refuses to believe him. During the War Games match, the fake Sting entered as the fourth man in the NWO, but then the real Sting came out as the fourth member of Team WCW. He looked at Luger, asked him if it was proof enough that he wasn't the one who attacked him, gave him the finger, and then walked out of the match. The next night on Nitro, Sting gave an angry promo about what had transpired over the last week, which concluded with Sting telling everyone that they could stick it and that he was now a free agent. This would mark the last time Sting would have a WCW match for over a year. Over the next several months, Sting would appear with an ever-growing dark hair, a trench coat, a white face paint made up to look like the character from the movie The Crow. He would show up, attack members of both the NWO and WCW, and then the NWO would formally ask Sting to join them since WCW betrayed him, to which Sting would reply, "The real Sting may or may not be in your price range," and, quote, "The only thing that's for sure about Sting is nothing is for sure."
Can we talk about how big of a change in character this was for this guy just for a minute? I mean, he had been working out of the Surfer Sting, situation for a while, but and by all accounts, Scott Hall gave him the idea of like, bro, have you seen The Crow? You should do your face like that. I don't know how true that is, but nobody's ever really refuted it, and I can buy it. Seems like the guy Scott Hall would be doing would say just randomly to give away that in the back. But Sting was such an electric performer. He had the big personality, and he was
very colorful.
The kids and the ladies, and he had the surfer hair and the bright colors and the paint. And for him to start going into this like super emo phase was very, very different. And it was scary. It was almost like a horror movie in some ways.
And I think that was the point. But he was supposed to portray a brooding character who was in the shadows of everything, right? Watching and lurking, and you never knew what he was going to do, and it was beautifully done, beautifully done. But yeah, you go from neon pinks and yellows and blues and oranges and all this and this colors, and then slowly it started going to darker oranges and darker blues, and his hair turned from bright blonde to brown, and then it started growing out, and then all of a sudden it's black, well, not black, but it's dark brown, it's white
would,
face. It was weird.
It would be like if you took a hair metal band and then they just became a grunge band over a few months. Like if you just imagine the eras, like like think of like the glammiest bands you can think of, even like Poison or Trickster or something like that, or even Winger, you know. And then all of a sudden they cut it all off. They go dark. They go heavy. You know, all that stuff. It's. I mean, that's a good analogy for what's happening here, because the whole thing about the Crow is that it's a character built on vengeance, right? So instead of being this like fighter for good, truth, and the American way, all the stuff Hulk Hogan used to be about, right? That's kind of what Sting was. His shtick was. He's now just going to be about Sting and about vengeance, and he's going to be this scary character. And it was cool. It was a great idea.
Yeah, it was awesome, and you know, it was such a big change. It was like Hogan changing from babyface to heel, right? It was a big deal because Sting was WCW's Hulk Hogan in a sense, right? He was their franchise guy. You can say Ric Flair all you want, but Ric Flair would bounce in and out of heel face all the time. Sting was that babyface from the get-go, never was a heel, and all of a sudden he's got these heelish characters coming on, and it was a big switch for him, and I was like enthralled by it.
It was so cool to watch because again, it wasn't what you expected from the guy.
Yeah,
you know, it's not what he did, and I think that's what got people interested. You know, so it's a great gimmick idea.
It totally is. Now Sting would not speak again after his rant for over a year. He would appear regularly in the rafters with his trench coat, a baseball bat, sometimes even a crow with him. And at times he would confront random WCW wrestlers in the ring and provoke them into either going after him or, hinting that they were going to attack him before he would just hand them his bat, turn his back, and wait for them to smash him. Now, the WCW wrestlers never did, but he was offering them the opportunity to prove his loyalty, that he was okay with them turning on him. He was not going to attack them. In January of 1997, Randy Savage would, interestingly enough, join Sting as a free agent in the rafters, but at Super Bowl VII, Randy would help Hulk Hogan defeat Roddy Piper and join the NWO. Sting would then come out with the NWO, making it appear that he was also there with Savage, but then at Uncensored in 1997 of March, everything came to a head when Sting came down from the rafters and attacked the NWO, revealing he was aligned with WCW all along. Sting would then come down from the rafters and attack the NWO, while the NWO sent their Sting to attack WCW wrestlers. During all this, J.J. Dillon, who was acting as WCW commissioner, tried several times to give Sting a contract, but he would not accept them and sometimes tore them up in his face instead. As J.J. Dillon grew frustrated, he finally asked Sting what he wanted. Sting took his bat and pointed directly at Hollywood Hogan. Dillon would soon make it official, and Sting would challenge Hollywood Hogan for the WCW Championship at Starrcade 1997. But let's just say it didn't go the way the fans wanted.
No, not at all. But man, again, that was the thing everyone was building up to, was, oh, we're finally going to get it. Hogan's going to get his comeuppance against Sting. And, well, there's a lot of reasons as to why that doesn't go the way you think it does in Starrcade 97.
Yeah, I remember the rumors, like you said earlier, the dirt sheets and the internet was just starting to peak or starting to get going. So there were a ton of wrestling news websites or rumor sites and all that stuff out there. And the rumor always was that Hogan and Sting was going to happen at Starrcade, and it just you kept waiting and waiting and waiting. And now it's finally been announced we're going to have that match. Sting would walk out of the match as champion, but not without being pinned fair and square in the middle of the ring first. The backlash over the match was so heated that WCW's vain attempts to explain the slow count, it never worked. It failed. They didn't take action. Hogan decried that Patrick was the referee and his decision should stand, so J.J. Dillon granted him a rematch on Nitro. In a move so WCW, the match ran over Nitro's time slot, and the finish wouldn't be shown until 2 Thursdays later on WCW Thunder. 2 Thursdays. There was another Nitro in the middle of those that they didn't even show what happened. They just kept you on the edge of your seat. Like, we couldn't show them because of contractual reasons. Like, come on.
They screwed this up so bad. So bad.
It was. Once again, in the match, 2 referees declared 2 different winners, J.J. Dillon would then decide to vacate the WCW title and force Sting to give him the belt. Sting handed over the title belt and uttered his first words since fall of 1996, telling JJ he had no guts and telling Hogan he was a dead man. The match would now be set for Super Brawl 8.
So let's talk about those two matches for a second, Brian, because first off, that Starrcade 97 card, ouch, that's a bad card, dude. Like we talked about some of that. Go back and look at that some way. Yikes, there's some real yuck on that. But when you get to that match at the end, there's all this build up and stuff, and it's just a big sad trombone, man. And I've heard all the different things that like Bischoff and Hogan are like, oh, he's not in shape enough, he's not tan enough, he's got too much ring rust. I don't know what the truth is. Who knows? It's wrestling these days. But it did not go well. The match is not even really fun. And then to have Nick Patrick's, I think he's supposed to do like a slow count or I don't know what they screwed up, but it was like a screwed up Montreal situation too. It's very badly done.
If you ever listen to Nick Patrick talk about it, because he talks about it, he was told multiple things. The first, he was told to do a fast count, and then he was told, no, just do a regular count, and we'll do with what happens. And then some people say Hogan told him that Sting wasn't it, brother. Make him look good by doing a semi-fast count. Because you see, he started off like he was going to do a fast count and then slowed it down.
Yeah, you stopped.
Yeah, he went 1, 2, and then 3. It was like, oh, okay.
It's almost like he was waiting for him to kick out. Like, oh, I guess he's not.
Yeah, well, that which comes into play later, actually.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. But yes, agreed. So nobody knows for sure. Now, you talked about Bischoff on his podcast. He's mentioned multiple times that Sting was out of shape and Sting was not tan enough, which got him like blistered on both the internet and from Conrad Thompson. But I never thought about it, but watching it, Sting was out of shape, man.
Yeah.
I mean, he looked terrible.
Yeah.
His arms were flabby and he looked like he hadn't seen a gym in months.
If you hear Sting tell it too, this was at some of the worst times of his addiction and stuff. He'll tell you, he's like, they're not lying. I hadn't been in the gym in a long time. He said, I would really let myself go. I was loped out on all kinds of pain meds and stuff like that. He was not in a good place, mentally or physically. And it shows too. And there is some truth to ring rust. Like, it's one thing to work out and practice with guys and stuff, but to be on television and have to do this show, if you haven't done it in a month, you look rusty. I can't imagine 18 months. So he just looked completely lost, and you can tell Hogan is not one to carry people through matches. It's usually the other way, and Hogan's having to work that match, and it's bad. It's as bad as we're making it sound. It really is. So I give Steve Borden Sting credit for owning up to the fact that he was not ready for that. And he didn't get himself ready for it, and for a lot of reasons, and no blame to be had at this point, but I get why they made the pivot, if it was a last minute pivot of we can't put the belt on this dude like this, boy, talk about a build up again that just led to a bunch of nothing. It's just a big waste of time.
The match, Hogan carried, you said it, Hogan carried this match. He was in charge most of the match. Sting got his few things here and a few things there, but he looked really bad when he took that leg drop and got pinned. And then to make matters worse, when they have Bret Hart hold off the bell and say it's not going to happen, and Bret Hart was under the understanding that it was going to be a fast count. Now, I don't know if he paid attention. He probably should have pivoted from that and said, I'm not going to let you screw over Sting, instead of that was a fast count, because it totally wasn't. And to have Bret come in a month removed, just a little over a month removed from being screwed by Vince McMahon in the WWF, to have him come into the storyline and be all like, I got screwed, Sting's not getting screwed story, was a terrible move, in my opinion. It did nothing good. And when we talk about the Nitro after, there's some stuff that goes into play there as well. But this whole thing, like, you watch this match, it was slow, it was plodding, it was boring, and it was basically Hogan beating the tar out of Sting, who was blown up after the first drop kick he put on Hogan. And you could see it. He was just huffing and puffing. And my thought is, you have this set, right? You have this set for quite a long time. It's your job Eric, to make sure that your wrestler's ready to go. You have this place called the WCW Power Plant that trains things. Send him down there for a couple weeks to get in shape, to get ready. I understand he had issues and all that, but if he's assigned to go down there by Eric Bischoff to get ready, he'll go down there and do that. He may not be the best and whatever, but at least he'll get his conditioning ready to go and at least can practice for this match. I don't know.
If you see that he's not ready for it, you don't do this kind of goof ending. You do the schmoz. You have the heels all run in. It's a DQ. Now that's not satisfying, but it just sets up the story to keep going. Because then it's like, oh, see, he had him, and then just like always, this heel ass Hogan cheats to get out of it. That builds good heat. But to let it go off like this, you've now just murdered your storyline.
Right, and they did this really well with Roddy Piper. Like, they had a series of matches, Hogan and Piper, that saw them, at Havoc and Starrcade and Super Brawl, wrestle great times and use schmoz endings and whatever to kind of build the story to a final conclusion. They could have totally done that with Sting. It's almost like they're trying to do it, but they did it completely ass backwards. And this is beyond ridiculous. This match was horrible. It capped off an absolutely horrible card. Now, it was a good way to end for fans being excited that Sting won, but if you're watching this, you're like, well, why did Sting win? Like,
it's like watching your team win because the other team commits a stupid penalty that knocks them out of field goal range, and they have to just chuck it to the end zone or something. The Super Bowl.
Not even that. It's more like your team loses on a touchdown, and the refs throw a phantom penalty to make you play again, and then you intercept it and go back for
you mean what happened to the Bengals when they played the Rams a few years ago?
Totally. Like, that's the feeling, right? Like, you won, and then you didn't, and then they won the next play, right? That's how it feels. It was so pathetic. Now, let's talk about what happens next, Jay. Before you set up the scene for the rematch, let's talk about what happens next. On Nitro, you have Bischoff coming out and complaining to J.J. Dillon about the fact that, and Hogan was in the ring too, about how he's still the champion. He pinned him 1, 2, 3. If you watch the tape, they try to play the tape. It's hilarious. They try to play the tape to show what happens, and the tape keeps pausing, and they can't get it to work. It's absolutely, totally WCW. Funny as hell. But they explain how it wasn't a fast count. He won the match, and he should be the rightful champion. And stupid Bret Hart came out and cost him everything, and Sting's not the rightful owner, right? JJ comes out and says, the executive committee is reviewing things because of what happened, but I've talked to Sting, and Sting's willing to make it. Anyone in the NWO wants to have a match against him, he'll put the belt on the line. He is here, ready to go. Later, Bischoff comes out and confronts JJ and says, you're on. Hogan's going to take him on. We're going to settle this once for all. Hogan's going to get his belt back. So that sets up the match that night. Now, Bret Hart comes out and has a promo talking about how he wasn't going to let Sting get screwed in this match. And Hulk Hogan, I'm coming for you. And building up the fact that Hogan ran away from him back in 1993 when he was supposed to put Bret over for the belt and decided to give it to Yoko instead. And Bret's always been bitter about that. So they're already setting up Hogan's next feud, right? It's going to be Bret Hart. This is going to be awesome.
Because why would you pay for Bret Hart if you're not going to put him in that main event, right?
Oh, yeah. Never happens. Well, actually, I'll take it back. They wrestle once on Nitro, and it's a stupid-ass schmoz ending there, too. Maybe we'll cover that one day.
Yeah.
But so that happens. Then they finally get to the match. And again, this is Hulk Hogan beating the holy snot out of Sting almost the whole time. Then all of a sudden Sting comes back, and just as the Randy Anderson, who's refereeing this match, gets in the middle and gets knocked out by Sting on a stinger splash. He's really bad at that, by the way. He keeps knocking out refs with that stupid splash. We're out of time, folks. We gotta go. And that's it. Cliffhanger ending. You don't know what happens. And then this is before Thunder, right? This is the week before Thunder goes on the air, so we have to wait until next Monday. And they basically don't do anything about it. They just tell you they can't show you the footage. They're going to show it to you on Thunder instead, on the debut
episode. They're trying to drive people to the new show.
3 more days you have to wait for this. You've already waited a week. You got to wait 3 more days.
Which, to the point, by that point, everyone knew because it was all over the burgeoning internet and the forums. Everybody knew. You didn't see it.
Spoilers were there.
And well, here's the other thing, too. How dumb this idea is. The guy's not in shape the night before. So the night after, he's now in shape to do it.
Well, whatever. They're trying to save face, I think. And anyway, they get to Thunder and they're going to show the footage. They show the footage, and once again, you have a referee getting knocked out. Randy Anderson, right? Then we come back, and again, who comes down? It's Nick Patrick. Yeah. Nick Patrick comes down. Hogan rolls him up and gets a freaking 3 count.
Mm-hmm.
A plain 3 count on Sting. Nick Patrick calls for the bell, but then he gets knocked out. And Randy Anderson suddenly comes to. Sting attacks Hogan. Gets him in the Scorpion Deathlock. Hogan taps again. It's over. Now we got 2 referees declaring the same winner again. Another unfinished roll. So J.J. Dillon, after showing the footage, decides that he's going to hold up the title, and it's going to be Sting and Hogan at Super Brawl. There must be a winner. Whatever. He suspends Nick Patrick. He suspends a bunch of other people for getting involved. And now we have to wait until Super Bowl. So Jay, set the scene for the ultimate rematch in this trifecta of garbage.
So we have to wait all the way till February, late February, and we're going to go to the Cow Palace in San Francisco, California. Actually, it's just north of San Francisco. San Francisco bisects the parking lot, so that's why they claim it, but it's actually in a different place. Attendance is a little over 12,000, which is pretty good. Pay-per-view buys are at 415,000, but just to give you some comparison, Starrcade of 97 was over 700,000. So people are checking out on this, Brian, and Super Bowl was a pretty big pay-per-view at this point for them. This is the 8th iteration of it, and it's down. On commentary, we got Tony Schiavone, Bobby Heenan, and Mike Tenay, of course. We're doing the 3-man team. Mean Gene's back there doing interviews, and there's also a lot of spotlight on the referees here because Nick Patrick is reinstated again, but he thinks he's calling the main event, but he's not. But he is, but he's not. So we'll get to that. We also get David Pincher on the ring announcing until the main event, when it's always, of course, Brian's favorite, Michael Buffer, because lighting several $100,000 on fire is nothing new for the WCW at this point.
I do have to say, though, this is the best Michael Buffer has been because he's gotten chased out of the ring all 3 matches.
Yes, yes. Yeah, it is the best. It's a pretty stacked card, though. I got to say, now, I ding Starrcade pretty hard. This card is good. Like, this is a good PLE to go back and watch, y'all. You get the World Television Championship, which is a favorite title of mine, by the way, the WCW TV title. Opening stage with not 1, but 2 matches. So you get Booker T and Rick Martel in the first bout, and I understand this is Rick Martel's last televised match in America, right?
Yeah, he tore his quad in this match, unfortunately, and I don't think he ever wrestled on TV again after that.
Yeah, but Booker T's doing great work. Of course, it's really supposed to be him and Saturn anyway, so Perry Saturn comes in to take on, and Booker T gets another banger match, and in the end, of course, it's Mr. Can You Dig It, Sucker, comes out on top, and I love Booker T, this era of Booker T. He's so fun. He's he's what Sting was when he had the TV title. He's electric. He's got all the moves. He's over as hell, and people love it, and it's 25 minutes of this, and it's really, really good. You get Disco Inferno taking out La Parka. That's kind of whatever. Goldberg squashed Brad Armstrong. That was a late addition to the card because Larry Zbyszko's opponent died. And so suddenly so they had to make a pivot on that. So good old Goldberg coming to do what he was doing. This was in the ramp-up of Goldberg's streak. We've already talked about that on the last episode. But so you would listen to that one if you want to in the Juicebox archives, folks. But this is when Goldberg was really getting over with that streak business. Then you get Chris Jericho and Juventud Guerrera in a great, cruiserweight title versus mask match. And dude, this is a banger of a match again. I keep using that word, but it really is. They both go for everything. Jericho slaps on a great version of the Lion Tamer in a reversal and gets the submission. Juventud's got to take off the mask. That was a big deal at the time. Yeah. British Bulldog beats Steve Mongo McMichael by submission. And then you get another great Diamond Dallas Page match. And one of these days, we're going to have to do some DDP because we love him. But him and Chris Benoit for the U.S. title. What a match, dude. They put on a show. Probably the match of the night, honestly. Which is saying something at this point because they've all been pretty good. And then you get a heavily taped up Lex Luger defeating Randy Savage and half the damn NWO, it seemed like. in a no DQ match, when because he had Miss Elizabeth out there too. When he finally got his torture rack submission move on. So then you had the match where the walk-ins took longer than the actual match. The Outsiders, Hall and Nash with Dusty Rhodes? ? I forgot about that.
Yeah, Dusty joined the NWO.
Yeah. They beat the Steiner brothers with Ted DiBiase for the World Tag Titles. But the big move out of this is when Scott Steiner turned on Rick and became Big Papa Pump. Halfway through the match, he hands the belts to Hall and Nash. at the end. That puts him in, squarely in the NWO now. And you're seeing a breakup of a great tag team in the Steiners. So I'm going to tell you, when I saw that, I was pissed, because even though I knew, I was in for it. I was like, damn, they broke up the Steiner brothers, because I loved them when they were coming up. And that was a big move. So all in all, up until the main event here, there's really only a couple of matches that are kind of like snoozers, and you just go get a drink during them. But the rest of them are really good. It's a heck of a card, man.
It's a fantastic card, and I think I mentioned before, Super Brawl cards have always seemed to be... Super Brawl and Halloween Havoc, I think, are the best cards WCW ever puts on all year round.
Yeah.
And they rarely disappoint.
Yeah.
You always seem to get disappointed by Starrcade, and then Super Brawl comes 2 months later, and it's like, oh, thank God. Right?
It's wild,
they're still
right?
good wrestling. Yeah.
It would be like if WrestleMania sucked, but then like Elimination Chamber was awesome, or Money in the Bank was awesome, something like that.
Yep.
It's really strange that they could never get the Super Bowl right, but the third week of the season, everything's great.
Yeah, it was just crazy. But yes, awesome card. The year before was awesome. This one is awesome. I think the year after is really good too. Well, okay, we'll say pretty good, because you did get Hogan and Flair again for the
we'll have to get to that one day too. That whole fiasco as well. But no,
yeah,
I mean, it really is a good card. I mean, again, between Booker T and what Diamond Dallas Page is doing, and then what Juventud and Chris Jericho do. I mean, you've got just those 4 matches alone are worth it. And everything else is not bad. Even again, that very short tag match is worth it just to watch Scott Steiner turn on his brother. Because you knew something was coming, because they had teased that a lot too. I gotta say again, as far as building up storylines, the WCW was doing great work at this point of building things up, and then even paying some of them off. Like the whole, Hogan being the third man was a great payoff, and then this happening. But we're getting to that point now where, like you said, the NWO is becoming too big for its own good. Everything's starting to get a little ballooned, and we've just blown our huge, payoff, and now we got to try to rescue it with this main event again. And wow, we're gonna get into this this match, man. It's gonna be wild.
It is. Now, we had a pay-per-view between Starrcade and Super Brawl. It was the NWO Sold Out, one of the worst pay-per-views they've ever put on. Not necessarily because the matches were all bad, but they whitewashed the whole pay-per-view with this ugly coloring. They gave no entrance music to the WCW wrestlers and only the NWO wrestlers. It was bizarre. It was bizarre. Now,
really
they could have
idea.
done Hogan Sting on that to build that up, but I think what they wanted was Sting to get his ass in shape, because he comes out in this one and he's finally got definition to his body again.
Yeah,
but he
looks
didn't.
good.
The other matches,
I wanted to say that. I'm glad you brought it up. He looked like he really hit the treadmill. He hit the gym. He hit the nutrition. He got himself cleaned up enough, personally, that he could go again. Because what you talked about it in the Starrcade match, he blows up after like 2 moves. Yeah. And that has really happened here. He got back in shape pretty quick. So I give him credit for coming out and being in good shape for this one, because I imagine they probably told him, like, this is it, man. Like, you got to do this or not. Which is wild considering how they go after this. But
we'll get there, yeah. Now, this match, again, is a lot of Hulk Hogan just dominating on Sting. And Hogan is great in this match. Like, he heals it up huge, and he's yelling at the crowd, like, tell him who the man is, Sting, over and over again. And Hogan, I give him a ton of credit, because he really made this important with his facials, his wrestling reactions, all that stuff. He was doing a great job of selling the importance of this match, even when Sting's not at times. And he does a great job here, just kind of beating on Sting and just basically showboating on him. Like, who's the man, Sting? You tell him who the man is, Sting. I'm the man. I'm the champion. You're nothing, and he's awesome during this. And, I always say, like, Hulk Hogan did himself a major disservice by letting his bald spot grow so bad that he looked like he was 80 in the ring, because when he's got that bandana on, he looks like a badass. Yeah. But when that thing comes off, he looks like he's a geriatric guy.
Bro, that skullet was bad. That's a bad move. Yeah, that's as bad as, like, well, Jesse Ventura did that too. He let it go way too long, and it's that stringy situation that you just can't do, man. At some point, you just got to go with it.
Got to shave it off or get some help.
Yeah, and
because it looked
he was
bad.
not going to get the help. So that, it looks bad. But now so we say this, we bang on Hogan for a lot of stuff. He is in awesome shape.
Oh,
He's slim.
phenomenal.
He's he's not the big bulky dude anymore because we're post steroid trial. At this point, so we're watching that. We're also trying to live past 45, and he's in really good shape. He looks great. He's moving better than he has in years, probably because he's not carrying that extra 35 pounds around. and he is really doing a good job of being the heel agitator because he's not only kicking his ass, but he's talking the whole time. And that's
and taunting them and the fans,
he's taunting the fans, and they get a little bit of the outside stuff, but they don't do a ton of that. Last time they felt like they did that just to catch a breath, and in Starrcade, and this one they're going after it. And when they finally get into the match and the back and forth, it's pretty intense for about 5 to 6 minutes.
It is. It's really well done. The outside work when they're going on the outside and bashing each other's heads into the guardrails, and Sting takes a nasty jump, and he did that in the first one, but this one looked really bad where he goes after Hogan and leaps, and Hogan moves and he hits that guardrail right on the pectoral there. It looked like that really hurt, but obviously not too bad. But man, they go all out here. They're jarring with the fans. Hogan's giving 2 sweets to some of the fans and then yelling at others. It was just really well done. And then you got, in this match, it was Charles Robinson who was the referee. And Charles Robinson, of course, as Sting's coming out, what does he do? He Stinger splashes Charles Robinson out. What the hell? Like, stop Stinger splashing the referee.
J.J. Dillon should ban this move. It's murdering your referees.
Every time. So he's knocked out, and who comes out, Jay? Who comes out?
Nick
Patrick. Now reinstated Nick Patrick. And this is probably my favorite part of the whole night. Is because he comes out, and Hogan hits that leg drop, and Nick Patrick goes down for the count. 1, 2, and you see him slide his hand under Sting to tell Sting to kick out, which is hilarious. And only 2. And Hogan's like, what? And Hogan's face is the best. And I love it when he turns to me and says, it's me. Like, he's supposed to count the fast 3. Just brilliant work. And so Nick Patrick is there. He's calling it down the middle, and Schiavone, of course, is selling like, "Oh, Nick Patrick is the man. He's actually doing his job." Blah 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 blah, and hilarious. But then the best is when Sting is coming back. He's going for the Scorpion Death Drop, and what's Hogan do? He kicks Nick Patrick in the junk and knocks him out of the match.
Hard.
Absolutely hilarious.
Yes. And so we've had 2 ref bumps now. 2.
Yeah, 2, absolutely. But this one on purpose. It was so well done. And Nick Patrick's just down there like he'd been, murdered. And Hogan gets the Stinger, the Scorpion Death Drop laid on him. And of course, no one's there to count. And then what happens?
The whole NWO comes out.
Virgil comes down.
It's Scott Norton,
Vincent.
Buff, Brian Adams, Vincent, Conan, Randy Savage. But they twist us. Randy Savage hits Hulk Hogan with a spray can.
Yeah, with a spray paint can, and then puts it next to him. Yeah. But this is interesting because if you were watching the Nitros and Thunders, Randy Savage had been having outs with a bunch of the NWO guys. He had knocked Eric Bischoff out on an episode of Thunder. He had attacked Scott Hall and Kevin Nash on that same Thunder, and Hogan was trying to make the peace with him and all this. So he's on his way out of the NWO at this time and really rebelling against them. So for him to come down there, and reminder that a year earlier in the match with Roddy Piper, it was Savage who cost Piper the match and gave Hogan the win. Now it's Savage costing Hogan the match and giving Sting the win. What I didn't like about it was you got the spray paint to the head, Sting clears out the NWO and then just covers him. He doesn't put another move on him. He doesn't try to do anything. Like, he just covers him. And that's the 3. I would have liked to, because he doesn't know Sting's that Hogan's been knocked out by Savage. So why just cover him?
Yeah, you can't. Like, the reason it's a blown end is because your babyface can't win by heel tactic, right? That doesn't sell. Like, he's got to win because of something he does. Like, if he sees that spray can, he should kick it to the side, pick Hogan back up, do that reverse DDT situation again, then pin him.
Yeah,
like that. Then it's like, oh, he just put one on extra, for good measure, and everybody would have gone for that. But the fact that it's like, well, he didn't even know he got help. 1, so he looks dumb, and then 2, you've now said like, well, he can't beat him on his own. So you've just like completely
it's a total cover for Hogan
thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's
to
a
put
total
Hogan
cover
over.
for Hogan. Yep.
Yeah.
So that Hogan doesn't lose cleanly. The only time Hogan loses cleanly is when he loses to Lex Luger, right? And then he wins the belt back 3 days later, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But
He lost clean to Goldberg when he finally loses to him.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's later
That's later on down the
in
line.
the year. But it just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. And of course, Sting didn't know that the spray paint can was there or any of that happened. He just covers him, gets the 3, wins the match, and then sees the spray paint can and says, "Oh, okay. Well, since this is here, I'm just gonna spray paint WCW on Hogan," which is great because that's what NWO has been doing to their opponents this whole time. So it is good. The fans popped. It was good for that. But again, this is the 3rd match now that they've had, and all of them have kind of left this blah taste in your mouth on how it ended.
That's because they can't stick the landing, and that's the thing. And they've got it laid out pretty well. Everything else about this works. Like, it's just that when Savage comes in and does that, Sting should actually have seen him clock him with that spray can, and then done a move to Hogan to put him down, and then that would have been okay. Well, at least he did something for it. But now he just gets a win because, oh well, he had help, but he didn't even know about it. That's what's so wild is it didn't make any sense. Of course, Nick Patrick, like you said, has gotten kicked in the junk, but is holding his side as if he is taking shrapnel while he's still making that 3 count. And I'm like, he's not even in the right position. It's well, as with so many things of WCW at the time, man, it's great right up until that end, and then they just botch it. They just blow the ending. They just can't finish anything. And I read a review of this pay-per-view that said you watch the first 2/3 for the matches and the last third for the personality. And I think that was Jack Brahma of 411 Mania that said that. And I love that quote because I'm like, yes, that's dead on, because the last of this is not very good. It's the outcome you want, but not in the way you want it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It again leaves a sour taste in your mouth. You got the title on the guy you want. You don't want Hogan to have the title, right? Because you're sick of Hogan being champion. So you got the title on the guy you want, but you're like, what happened here? Like, Sting looks awful. He doesn't look like a champion after this match.
All right, so let's talk about what happens after this, though, with the belt, as it were. So we go to March to Mobile, Alabama to Uncensored. Sting's not even in the main event with the title. He goes against Scott Hall. He beats him with Dusty Rhodes. Hogan and Savage are in a steel cage match that ends in nothing. So Hogan's in the main event no matter what. Flash forward another month to Spring Stampede. What happens? We go to Spring Stampede, and Randy Savage beats Sting in a no DQ match for the world title. So 2 months later, they've yanked the belt off of him.
2 months. His title reign. 18 months of build. 2 months or 3 months of unknown what's going on.
Yeah.
Give him the title finally. And then 2 months later, we're done with you.
Yeah, we're done. And you know when he gets another shot at the world title again? Not for a while.
Now he's
going to be in a tag team situation for a long time.
He's going to get his next shot will be, he'll get a shot against Goldberg at one point.
But
and then after that, after that, he'll get a shot against Hogan again, all the way into 1999.
Yeah, exactly. So we go all the way forward with this. So 2 months later,
what drove me nuts about this whole thing, so I understand what they had to do, but Randy Savage was already wrestling on a pretty bum leg at the time he wrestled Sting, and still put on a hell of a good match. Those two, it was only 10 minutes, but that match was really good. And Savage wins the title. And this is all to put in your face to Hulk Hogan, right? Because they still haven't really broken up the NWO yet.
Yeah, we haven't factioned off yet.
It was on the verge, and by the next month, you'd have both the Wolfpack and the NWO Hollywood. But yet, it still hadn't happened. So Savage was still claiming that he was the leader of the NWO because he was the champion now. And Hogan was just a player because he's no longer champion. So they have a match the next night on Nitro, and what happens? Of course, Savage drops the damn title to Hulk Hogan again. What is with people winning the title only to just hand it over to Hogan the next night? This will happen again in a year.
In a year, yeah, because this is when Goldberg finally takes it from Hogan the back half of the year, and as we know, we already talked about what happens at the Starrcade with Nash, and then the turnaround on the Nitro in January. So yeah, it's a pattern that you can see throughout the Monday Night War era of WCW, that no matter what, it ultimately all comes back to putting the belt back on Hogan. And is that the right call? Is that the thing to do? Maybe. I think it's the way that it's done that has just soured people through the years. I think it's fun to have a guy who is your central figure. And it's hard to argue anybody was bigger than Hulk Hogan at this point, or Hollywood Hogan. And I get that. That's fine. It's how they get there that just always has bugged me. And it's the fact that once somebody defeats Hogan, they get discarded, but never by Hogan. Hogan doesn't beat them. Somebody else does. And then they lay down for Hogan. Like, Hogan never gets any comeuppance back on anybody. And that kind of weakens him as a champion, in my opinion, if you're going to sell that story.
Agreed, 100%. It makes the title that had been held by Hogan for the most part for a better part of 15 months, right? It makes it devalued when you just swap it like that all of a sudden, and it makes you feel like only Hulk Hogan can have long reigns, and which is complete crap. And so you'll see this over and over again with WCW as the time goes on. You got this one where Randy Savage wins the belt and then drops it back to Hogan. You had Luger a year before in August where he won the title on a Nitro only to drop it at the pay-per-view 5 days later back to Hulk Hogan. It leaves a sour taste in your mouth. You get Kevin Nash winning the title and dropping it to Hogan a week later on Nitro. I just don't understand. And then the title really starts hot swapping at that point.
I just want to say we have now fully entered the hot shotting of the title era of wrestling. And, WWE was doing this too. They weren't immune. Everybody was going through it. And it's, on one hand, it was like, holy cow, you got to tune in. You never know what belt's getting swapped over. But on the other hand, it's like, they're just props anyway, but these mean nothing anymore. Like, there's no specialness to it. And at this point, the pattern is so recognizable in WCW that when somebody else gets the title, the first thing in my head was always like, well, when is it getting dropped back to Hogan? Because it's coming. Yeah. And you can pretty well set your clock that eventually it would come back to drop it to Hogan.
Well, 100%. So let's do the fantasy booking of this, Jay, because I have some things that I would do totally different here. First being, Sting would have won that first match at Starrcade cleanly and won the title after building him up for 15 freaking months. He deserved to get that belt. Now, I understand the hesitations that they went through because of his shape and his, personal battles he was going through and everything else that was going on with him at the time. I understand the hesitation, but if you have that hesitation, you know about it before this match. You know about it. You take care of it or you don't book it, right? Let him get his demons taken care of and then book it later. Either way, Sting should have won. Sting should have been champion from that December, 28th or whatever it was, of 1997, all the way through that Spring Stampede if you wanted to really drop it off there. I think he should have held that title for at least 6 months to really bring credibility back to the WCW side of the story and to that whole 18-month payoff. Unfortunately, that's not how it happened. But if I were booking, that's how I would do it. And then I would have him go through the NWO big shots: Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Scott Steiner even, now that he's there, then get back to Hogan. That's how I would have done it.
I'm with you. You either have him win it clean and then you get him clean, after Starrcade, or you have him lose it because everybody runs in on him, but then you create no, there's going to be a bunch of dudes that now have his back, the next time, and you take the belt off in January, February, and you let him run with it, at least through Great American Bash, something like that. But at that point, they turned their mind and turned their attention to Goldberg pretty quick in 1998. Yeah. But I'm with you. They should have let him have a run with it one way or the other, because they built all that up, and for it to just pay off in a 2-month title reign. And then again, the way they put it back on Hogan through that sort of like by proxy is just annoying. It's a really disappointing thing. And that's what sucks about this is, again, man, it's the setup is so great. It's like getting right up there, and then you get to the ending, and then it just sinks it. We talked about it before. I mentioned that Super Bowl. That was a really good game between the Rams and the Bengals until the end of it, and it's like that got decided by a flag. Like, that is just terrible, and you just hate to see it. And it's I hear the other side of it is like, oh, that builds great heat for the heels. No, it really doesn't. Not when the heels are getting bailed out by the management, and it's obvious.
And not when all these run-ins from your bottom tier talent from the NWO. I mean, bring out some of the names.
Yeah, Nash and Hall should be doing the run-in job. That was their job
Hall,
when they came in. Was they were
absolutely
disrupting, and the fact that they're not doing
nowhere
that
to be
anymore,
seen.
Yeah, it's messed up. But as we know, I mean, this was again when things started to crest, and now they're starting to go down. And we've already talked about when the slide begins, but we'll get more into those on another day.
I'd like to mention a couple things that I noticed while watching. So if you go back and you watch the Nitro following Starrcade, it's so much fun because there's a certain someone who appears in that show multiple times in the crowd that nobody knew who was at the time. Do you know who that might be? Baltimore, Maryland was where the show was.
No.
Stacey Keebler.
Really?
In the crowd that night, wearing her WCW shirt, white shirt, and she's proudly, cheering on. And they go to her during the Bret Hart promo. They go to her during the Sting Hogan match. They show her a couple times in the crowd, and that was before I don't know if they knew who she was. I mean, she was a Ravens cheerleader, I believe, at the time, so they may have known that the people in Baltimore would know who she was. But I thought that was fun. They showed her a few times there, and every time they came to Baltimore, they would find her in the crowd. There's shots of her in a Wolfpack shirt at some shows and all that before she became a Nitro girl. So
and
that
then
was
later
cool.
on became this, Hall of Fame character.
Star,
So,
yeah.
She was a star, but this is somebody they found in the mix. That's neat. I had not recognized that. That's cool.
Yeah, I thought that was a cool Easter egg. So if you're interested, go to the December 29th WCW Monday Nitro, and you can watch the whole thing. I don't recommend that. But you could you skip to the Bret Hart promo. You might see him in the Hogan Bischoff promo. I can't recall. You might see her there. But you also see her during the Sting Hogan match. She's in a white shirt, and she's cheering on, and they go to her a couple times at least during that show. It was kind of fun. I was like, oh my God, it's Stacey Keebler.
That is very cool. That is always cool to see. So.
Yeah.
Well, folks, we have come to our final bell here, and as always, it's been a lot of fun reliving this moment here on Main Event Maniacs. You'll find this show on this very feed in the Juicebox feed from time to time. Feel free to connect with Juice Springsteen on X at Juicy Steen, on Instagram at Juicy Wrestling Closet, and you can subscribe on YouTube as well at Juicy Steen. And then subscribe to this podcast everywhere you find your podcast, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, obviously on the YouTube now. You can check that out. We appreciate the support. Leave us a comment, and you can follow Brian and I on X as well.
Yeah, you can follow Jay at JRan here, and I'm Brian Thomas 878. Send us your thoughts on this episode, previous episodes, and any suggestions that you'd like to see us talk about for future episodes.
Yeah, and so as we close out this chapter of Main Event Maniacs, we've done a lot of WCW, a lot of WWE. We promise we're going to get to some ECW, some TNA. There's some other things. We will spread the love here on Main Event Maniacs in the coming year. So until next time, this has been your Main Event.
That was The Juice Box with Juice Springsteen. Make sure to subscribe to The Juice Box wherever you listen to podcasts.